Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is, of course, Monday, March the 23rd, 2020, 2026. Hey there, Net Cherry. Thanks for good evening. I know where you're at. It's probably like tomorrow morning already. It's like what, just after 1 a.m. where you're at, I believe, right? Over there in England. Um, All right. So, anyways, well, with at least one other person here, I guess I can get right into talking about what's going to be going down tonight. Of course, a friendly reminder to everybody, as always, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. At midnight exactly, huh? All right. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess maybe you guys don't celebrate. I guess it's 7 hours instead of 8. I guess where you're at now, probably maybe you guys don't celebrate daylight savings. I guess that's probably why. But anyways, so what's on tap for tonight. So over the weekend, this past Friday to be specific, legendary territorial wrestling star Dennis Condrey passed away at the age of 76. So we're going to go back and take a look back on the life and career of Dennis Condrey. I know for many of you the name probably doesn't sound quite as familiar unless you, of course, grew up in the mid early to mid 80s. As he was one of the founding members of the Midnight Express, both as a faction and then as a tag team. Um, So let's see. We do have daylight savings time. It's just on different dates. Rest easy, Dennis. Yeah. So again, we're gonna take a look back at the life and career of Dennis Condrey, known, for basically being one of the great southern great stars of the southeastern territories. Most notably in Alabama primarily, but also Tennessee during the NWA territorial days. Of course, did also spend some time in Jim Crockett. We're going to go over all that. Also, as always, after that, we'll do the wrestling wrap up. Well, depending on how fast we get through the stuff with Dennis, I might try to look up some more articles as well. But then we'll get into the wrestling wrap up, get all caught up in all the latest, all the weekend's action in pro wrestling, as well as looking ahead to tonight Raw, and also looking ahead to this weekend as TNA will be having its Sacrifice pay-per-view this Friday. Also, Ring of Honor will be teaming up with Maple Leaf Promotions up in or Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling up in Canada for one of their Global Wars shows. So we'll also probably talk a little bit about that, and then we'll, of course, wrap things up with this day in each history. So with all that being said, and we are going to get started a little early here. Let's go ahead and get going here. Let me pull up the article we're going to look at tonight. As I said, we're going to be looking at the life and career of Dennis Condrey, also known as Loverboy Dennis Condrey, one of the founding members of the Midnight Express, both as a tag team and a faction. So let's get into this. So Dennis Condrey, who passed away this past Friday. So let's get into all this. First, so Dennis Noel Condrey, born February 1st, 1950 in Florence, Alabama, Passed away March 20th, 2026. Ring names included his own Dennis Condrey and Mr. Pro. He was 6 feet tall, 255 pounds. Billed from the dark side when he was a member of the Midnight Express. Also billed from Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Trained by Joe Turner. Debuted in 1973. Retired in 2011. So now that some of the basics are out of the way, let's talk a little bit more about his career here. So Dennis Noel Condrey, February 1st, 1950 to March 20th, 2026, was an American professional wrestler. He was best known for his appearances with Continental Wrestling Association, CWA. That was the name of the Memphis territory before it became before they withdrew from the AWA and NWA and became the USWA. Jim Crockett Promotions, that was of course the promotion that would evolve into WCW, or one of them, and World Championship Wrestling in the 1970s 70s and 80s. Of course, World Championship Wrestling was basically what Jim Crockett Promotions became in 1988. So, the professional wrestling career, early career, 1973 to 83. Dennis Condrey was trained as a wrestler by Joe Turner. Debuting in 1973, he spent the early years of his wrestling career primarily for Nick Gulas's Tennessee-based NWA Mid-America promotion. The Mid-America promotion was based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Eventually it did. That's eventually before, of course, a number of other guys, including Jerry Jarrett, Eddie Marlin, Jerry Lawler, all got some of their early starts there as well. So, anyways, in mid 1975, in the context of the United States bicentennial, Condrey teamed up with Phil Hickerson to form the tag team known as the Bicentennial Kings, managed by Kangaroo Al Costello. Al Costello, for those of you who don't know, was one half of the original Fabulous Kangaroos tag team that wrestled a lot throughout the 50s and 60s. In 1975, they teamed with Al Green to win the NWA World Six-Man Tag Team Championship. That was the Mid-America version of that title. Back in the old days, the only world titles that were recognized throughout the entire NWA by the NWA Board of Directors were the NWA World Heavyweight title, World Junior Heavyweight title, World Women's title, and World Women's Tag titles. So any reference to titles like the World Six-Man tag titles, the United States titles, were generally regionally based. So a number of different territories would have different versions of those titles or their own claim to those titles. Let's see. In 1975, okay, yeah, we read that part already. So between 1975 and March 1977, they held the NWA Southern Tag Team Championships 3 times. Again, Mid-America's version of those titles. The NWA Southeastern Tag Team Championships once, basically the Southern version of those for what was known as Southeastern Championship. Well, originally Gulf Coast Championship Wrestling, and then eventually Southeastern Championship Wrestling, and the NWA Mid-America Tag Team Championship twice. They feuded with teams like Jackie Fargo and Jerry Jarrett. Bill Dundee and Tojo Yamamoto. And again, Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett, Bill Dundee, and Tojo Yamamoto would eventually go on to help form the Continental Wrestling Association in Memphis. And Chief Thundercloud and Danny Little Bear. In March 19th, so basically, Condrey was a mainstay in, of course, the Tennessee-based Mid-America throughout the late 70s there. In March of 1977, upon the schism between Nick Gulas and Jerry Jarrett, Condrey and Hickerson left NWA Mid-America to join Jarrett's breakaway Continental Wrestling Association. Yeah, a lot of the schism, some of the schism stemmed from Gulas trying to push his son, George, into the spotlight. George was not considered not that great of a wrestler, but yet was getting a lot of a push because his dad was the promoter, so, and Jerry Jarrett, thought, and that's when Jerry Jarrett decided to take a number of talent and move over to Memphis and start promoting shows out of Memphis, which eventually gave us, of course, Continental Wrestling Association, eventually the USWA. Let's see. From March of 1977 to January 1979, they held the NWA Mid-America Southern Tag Team Championship, later renamed the AWA Southern Tag, 4 times. Basically, when CWA decided to become an affiliate of the American Wrestling Association, they would basically become an affiliate of the AWA at that point in time. They feuded with teams such as the Gibson brothers, Ricky and Robert Gibson. Of course, Robert, before he started teaming with, this was something like 6 to 8 years before he started teaming with Ricky Morton as the Rock and Roll Express, and Tommy Gilbert and Tommy Rich. Again, some more names you guys should be familiar. Tommy Gilbert was the father of Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. So, in March of 1978, Condrey and Hickerson moved from Continental Wrestling Association to Knoxville, Tennessee-based Southeastern Championship Wrestling, a promotion that was basically that was led by the Fuller family, Ron Fuller, and of course Robert Fuller, who some of you might remember as Colonel Robert Parker in WCW or Tennessee Lee in the WWE. He and his cousin Jimmy Golden, who some of you might remember as Bunkhouse Buck, would be stars in the late 80s, early 90s, or mid to late 80s as part of a lot of Southeastern territories. They won the NWA Southeastern Tag Team Championship 4 times, feuding with Jimmy Golden and his series of tag team partners. In December 1978, they left Southeastern Championship Wrestling after losing a Loser Leaves Town match to Ken Lucas and Kevin Sullivan. In December 1978, Condrey and Hickerson returned to the Continental Wrestling Association, defeating Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler to win the AWA Southern Tag Team Championship for an 8th time. The following month, they lost the title to Dundee and Coco Beware, a.k.a. Bert the Birdman from WWE fame. Actually, Coco Ware, not Coco Beware. This marked their final appearance as a tag team. Condrey subsequently formed a new tag team with the Big C formed a new tag team, the Big C's, with Don Carson, with whom he won the AWA Southern Tag Team Championship for a 9th time. Condrey left the Continental Wrestling Association once more in March 1979. Condrey returned to NWA Mid-America in March of 1979. So this was like about a year and a half before Mid-America had finally closed down. In June 1979, he defeated Gorgeous George Jr. in Chattanooga, Tennessee to win the NWA Mid-America Heavyweight Championship. He held the title until October of 1979, so basically 4 months, when he lost to Dutch Mantell. Throughout 1980, Condrey primarily divided his time between Continental Wrestling Association and Georgia Championship Wrestling. In Georgia Championship Wrestling, the NWA affiliate in Georgia, of course. In September 1980, he defeated Steve Kern in the Bell Auditorium in Augusta, Georgia, to win the NWA Georgia Heavyweight Championship. He lost the title to Tony Atlas the following month. In 1980, Condrey formed a tag team with Randy Rhodes that became known as the Midnight Express in 1980. Now, this was the original Midnight Express tag team, and they would wrestle throughout, of course, Tennessee and Alabama. They'd go back and wrestle for Southeastern Championship Wrestling. In 1981, Norville Austin joined to form a stable. From 1981 to December 1983, they wrestled for Southeastern Championship Wrestling and Continental Wrestling Association. The stable was dissolved in December 1983 when Condrey left for Mid-South Wrestling. And as a stable, it's kind of funny because as a stable, Condrey, Rhodes, and Austin would win a few more tag team championships, and even though it would eventually become popularized by the Fabulous Freebirds, it was actually the Midnight Express here, the original Midnight Express, as a stable that would actually originate the idea of what would become known as the Freebird rule. The rule in which when you have like a stable of 3 wrestlers, they could interchange each other in and out, in tag matches. So even if, sometimes they could have a third man replace one of the members in a team for title defenses and what have you. So it was the original Midnight Express that actually brought us the idea of the whole free. Now, granted, the Fabulous Freebirds were the ones who popularized the idea, but the original Midnight Express were the ones who actually came up with it. Now we get to 1983, late 1983. And here's where at least the start of a number of the different incarnations of the Midnight Express that most of us probably would know started here. So Mid-South Wrestling, 1983 to 1984. In November 1983, Condrey debuted in Mid-South Wrestling, where he immediately formed a new version of the Midnight Express with Bobby Eaton and Jim Cornette as their manager. And of course, Cornette and Eaton would be the staples for the next 7-8 years here of the Midnight Express. From this point on in Mid-South Wrestling. Now, Mid-South Wrestling was, of course, the promotion that was run by Cowboy Bill Watts. And basically their primary areas for their territory were Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And they did do some shows in Oklahoma as well. So the Mid-South territory was Oklahoma, Arkansas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi. That was the Mid-South territory. Anyways, and again, friendly reminder to everybody, if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So as we continue on here, at first the Express was booked in an angle with the Mid-South Tag Team Champions Magnum TA and Mr. Wrestling 2. The highlight of the angle saw Eaton and Condrey tarring and feathering Magnum TA in the middle of the ring. You guys have heard of that idea. Now, tar and feather, when you tar and feather somebody, it's not a very pleasant experience. Basically, you get tar poured over you, and then they'll like put feathers over you. It was basically a form of humiliation. And a lot of times it was the idea being, well, you're a chicken, basically. We're calling you a chicken. That's why we're tarring and feathering you. The Express first won the tag team title when Mr. Wrestling 2 turned on Magnum TA, attacking him during the title match and allowing Eaton and Condrey to win the title without much opposition. I do need to go off camera here for a quick moment. I'll be right back, but I'll put some music on while I'm gone, and then we'll continue this history lesson of All right, I'm back. Let's get back into this article here. Mr. Wrestling 2 and Magnum TA splitting up. The Midnight Express needed a new team to defend their newly won title against. Now, just so you guys know, so throughout all the incarnations of the Midnight Express, of course, the music they would come out to would be Joe Glow's, Morota's Midnight Express. I think even FTR has used that before. And it was also the Midnight Express, this version of Loverboy Dennis Condrey, and it was also a thing too. Each version of the team, their individuals had like kind of nicknames as well. Like Dennis Condrey was known as Loverboy, so Loverboy Dennis Condrey. The originals were Loverboy Dennis Condrey and Ravishing Randy Rose, and then here in this version, the Mid-South version, Loverboy Dennis Condrey and Beautiful Bobby Eaton, and then so on and so forth. So, And it's kind of funny, you had Condrey and Eaton, who were both from Alabama, so this team worked pretty well together. They began a long series of matches against the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, which ran well into the 90s and spanned several wrestling promotions. Yes, probably one of the longest and most storied tag team rivalries in all of professional wrestling was the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express. Of course, a lot of that history due with Condrey and Eaton and Lane, Beautiful Bobby Eaton, Sweet Stan Lane. And of course, it spilled over into Smoky Mountain with, the Rock and Roll Express and Heavenly Bodies as well. So, which ran well. Okay, so, all right. So the two teams feuded throughout 1984 in Mid-South Wrestling before the Midnight Express left the promotion. The Midnight Express versus Rock and Roll Express series of matches were so well received by the fans that independent promotions continued to book them over the span of 3 decades, and concluded with them wrestling the final match of the feud, Eaton against Ricky Morton. Morton won the match. So yeah, that was because Dennis Condrey had retired in 2011, as they said here, but so Eaton, Condrey, and Cornette left Mid-South Wrestling in December 1984, in which they moved on to World Class Championship Wrestling, the promotion run by the Von Erich families in Dallas, based out of Dallas. Of course, you had, the Midnight Express going there, where they already had, they had the Fabulous Freebirds, as we previously mentioned, as well as, of course, the Von Erich family. So, in December 1984, Condrey and Eaton, accompanied by Cornette, began wrestling regularly for the Texas-based World Class Championship Wrestling promotion. Upon arrival, they immediately began a feud with the Fantastics. Another team, the Fantastics, is another team that another regional team that really had spanned a lot of NWA territories. Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers. At Christmas Star, so that was another big, more regional tag team rivalry, the Midnight Express and the Fantastics. At Christmas Star Wars in the Dallas Reunion Arena in December 1984, they unsuccessfully challenged the Fantastics for the NWA American Tag Team Championship. The American Tag Team Championships, the American Heavyweight Champions, were the primary titles for World Class at the time. In January 1985, they defeated the Fantastics in Dallas Sportatorium to win the NWA American Tag Team Championship. At Wrestling Star Wars later that month, they successfully defended the titles against the Fantastics. In March 1985, the titles were vacated after a controversial ending to a title match. At the second Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions in Dallas, in Texas Stadium, the event that was started up to honor the career of David Von Erich, who had passed away tragically from enteritis in Japan in late 1983. Let's see. In Texas Stadium in May 1985, the Fantastics defeated the Midnight Express to win the vacant titles. Midnight Express continued their feud with the Fantastics, but were unable to regain the titles. They left World Class Championship Wrestling in June 1985, joining Jim Crockett Promotions that same month. But probably with their time, with both Condrey and Eaton, and eventually when Lane would eventually join the Midnight Express in 19. Well, we'll get to that in a moment here, how that all came about. Hey, Metal. You know who doesn't do daylight savings time? Well, let's see, Arizona, I believe, right? Arizona doesn't do it, and I think there's one other state that does it, but I think but then I think throughout most of the world probably doesn't do it. But I'm sure you probably know. Metal. Anyways, so yeah, this will probably be our only um, article tonight. We're already past the 30-minute mark here. So, anyways, Jim Crockett Promotions, 1985 to 1987. In June 1985, Condrey, Eaton, and Cornette signed with Jim Crockett Promotions, JCP, the company that would eventually become WCW, of course, and were given national exposure on JCP's televised programs on Superstation TBS. So on the Superstation, that's where a lot of people would have probably, where a lot of people on the national level would have probably first seen Dennis Condrey, was in the mid 80s on like World Championship Wrestling, on the Saturday night program. In November 1985 at Starrcade 85, The Gathering, the Midnight Express lost to Jimmy Valiant and Miss Atlanta Lively in a street fight. Now, Miss Atlanta Lively was basically Ronnie Garvin dressed in drag. That's how that all came about. So, let's see. In November 1985, the Midnight Express reignited their feud with the Rock and Roll Express and won the NWA World Tag Team Championships Mid Atlantic version. As I told you guys earlier, this was still at a time when NWA did not recognize a singular World Tag Team Championship. They wouldn't do that until 1992. In 1992, but Mid Atlantic was one of several regional promotions that had their own claim to the World Tag Team Championships. From them in February 1986, during Superstars on the Superstation. During the course of their heated angle, Eaton and Condrey lost the title to Rock and Roll Express in August of 1986. Eaton and Condrey also had long-running feuds with the New Breed, Chris Champion and Sean Royal, as well as, hold on a sec, as well as the Road Warriors, Road Warrior Animal and Hawk. The feud with the Road Warriors included a scaffold match at Starrcade 86 with Skywalkers. In November 1986, which Midnight Express lost. So just so you, because I know you don't see a lot of scaffold matches anymore, but you could argue that kind of a precursor to like the Hell in a Cell in a way, just because of the bump you have to take off of that. So in a scaffold match, the idea of a scaffold match is to knock your opponent or opponents, in this case because it was a tag team match, knock your opponents off the scaffold. basically it's a last man standing kind of match in which you have or team, basically a scaffold match is the objective of the match is to knock your opponent or opponents off of the scaffold and be the last man or team standing, basically. So, you thought that when Mick Foley took that huge fall off the Hell in a Cage, that was the first time anybody took such a fall. Well, he'd have those falls in the normal cage matches too, but no, basically a big part of the scaffold match is taking such a bump as well. So, Conway left Jim Crockett Promotions in 1987. He left overnight, giving no notice to Cornette, Eaton, or the NWA. Yeah, there is a story out there where it's believed that part of the reason Condrey left the way he did was because he had issues with Jim Crockett Promotions in terms of I don't know, there's some kind of pay issue or something like that. But yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much the story going out there, that he had some kind of issues with and he just decided at one point to just leave. So there's that kind of belief out there. Now, granted, that's speculation, so take it for what it's worth. Take it with a grain of salt. But anyways, so after he left the NWA, of course, Condrey, 1987, the American Wrestling AWA, Condrey would reunite with former partner Randy Rhodes in the AWA under manager Paulie Dangerously. Loverboy Dennis and Ravishing Randy called themselves the Midnight Express and claimed the right to the name, which had since been used by Condrey and Eaton, and later Beautiful Bobby Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane in the NWA. Now, with that, in the NWA version, now Stan Lane was, of course, the man who would replace Condrey in the Midnight Express in the NWA's version of the. Now, of course, Stan Lane had his own storied tag team background, most notably with Steve Keirn as the Fabulous Ones, originally under the guidance of Fabulous Jackie Fargo, and of course, even before that, with Brian St. John in Championship Wrestling Florida as well. So they would defeat Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee for the AWA World Tag Team titles on October 30th, 1987 in Whitewater, Wisconsin. Of course, again, having more national exposure to the AWA as well. And of course, kind of reigniting a feud with Dundee and Lawler as well here. They would have a 2-month title reign, losing the titles to the returning Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. That was after their first stint when they were considered kind of, that's kind of when they were kind of, the WWE kind of fired them, I believe, just because lack of professionalism. On December 27, 1987 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then he would, of course, return to World Champ NWA, now under the name, of course, World Championship Wrestling, as Jim Crockett had sold his promotion to Ted Turner, and the deal was finalized in December of 1988 that year. Yeah. So after wrestling the Independents, Condrey returned to the NWA in November 1988 alongside Randy Rose and Paulie Dangerously, now calling themselves the original Midnight Express, quote unquote. During the November 5th episode of World Championship Wrestling, that was a Saturday program, Jim Cornette received an anonymous phone call. The caller ridiculed Cornette over Eaton and Lane's loss of the NWA World Tag Team titles to the Road Warriors on October 29th. Cornette recognized the caller and basically asked him to come say that to his face. At that point, Dangerously and the original Midnight Express hit the ring and proceeded to pummel Cornette and Stan Lane, who was wrestling in a singles match. By the time Bobby Eaton showed up, it was 3-on-1. Cornette showed up the next week on TBS carrying a bloodstained suit jacket, and the feud was on. The teams wrestled at Starrcade 1988, but nothing was solved. The Midnights versus Midnights would be the hottest feud in the NWA for months, building up to a six-man tag match involving the managers at Chi-Town Rumble. So basically, Paul Heyman. Now, just to kind of show you guys, because I know everybody thinks of Paul Heyman, sees the bald-headed. That was Paul Heyman right there in the middle, right there. He still had a full set of hair. That was even before he started up ECW. Um, let's see. Oh, yeah. Pay-per-view in February 1989. Because at Chi-Town Rumble, that was where that was also the same night Ricky Steamboat, I believe, defeated Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship as well. The one who got pinned would have to leave the promotion. However, due to changes in ownership, the NWA was going through booking upheaval, with Dusty Rhodes being replaced as head booker by George Scott. Jim Crockett Jr. already had a problem with Condrey due to his previous overnight disappearance, and Scott had previous animosity with Rhodes. So Scott's appearance as top booker made for the catalyst to bury both teams. And the feud. The feud was cooled off, and the loser leaves town match was going to be used to kick one of them out of the territory, and for all, and once and for all, and continue to bury the other. At the last minute, Dennis Condrey once again decided to leave NWA rather than take his pay-per-view payoff and give Crockett and Scott the satisfaction. Jack Victory was brought in as his replacement, and the match went forward. So Condrey would then go to Continental Wrestling Federation, CWF, and International Championship Wrestling. So those two promotions, Continental Wrestling Federation is what Southeastern Championship Wrestling became in 19. They withdrew from the AWA. Well, okay, so Southeastern Championship Wrestling would withdraw from the NWA, I believe, in 1987, and then eventually joined the AWA in 1988 and changed their name to Continental Wrestling Federation. International Championship Wrestling was basically an independent promotion that was started up by a number of former WWF wrestlers along with some Northeast independent guys, Angelo and Joe Salvaldi. So Condrey returned to Alabama, now known as Continental, in the spring of 1989. On July 22nd, 1989, Condrey defeated Tom Pritchard to win the CWF Heavyweight Championship, before losing the title back to Pritchard on December 6th. So he held it for about 4.5 months, I'd say. He would also form a short-lived tag team called the Lethal Weapons with Doug Gilbert. Doug Gilbert, the younger brother of Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert and the son of Tommy Gilbert. Together, they went to the New England area to wrestle for International Championship Wrestling. On December 30th, 1989, they defeated Phil Apollo and Vic Steamboat. Vic Steamboat, I believe, was the younger brother of Ricky Steamboat, who was subbing for Apollo's partner, Eric Sabracha, who no-showed, to win the ICW Tag Team Championship. They held on to the belts until March of 1990, when they left the promotion. Condrey retired shortly thereafter. So his initial retirement was in 1990. So later career, 2004 to 2011. Condrey came back to team with Eaton in 2004, wrestling along with Stan Lane as the Midnight Express in the Independents and feuding with the Rock and Roll Express and the Fantastic, reigniting those feuds, like 20 years after the fact, 20 years later. He signed with the World Wrestling Entertainment in March 2010 as a developmental trainer. He was assigned to Florida Championship Wrestling and worked with rookies on the NXT roster. Condrey retired again in 2011 after wrestling his last match on October 15th against Bill Mulkey at AWE Night of Legends. Bill Mulkey was part of the Mulkey brothers, who were basically enhancement talent for Jim Crockett Promotions and World Championship Wrestling in the mid to late 80s. Condrey died on March 20th, 2026, at the age of 76. Of course, he was a former AWA World Tag Team Champion. He held the end of the Mid-America CWA version of NWA Southern Tag Team Championships 9 times, 5 times with Phil Hickerson, a couple times with Randy Rose. He was also a former Mid-America Tag Team Champion with Phil Hickerson. Held the Mid-America version of the United States Tag Team Championship 5 times with Phil Hickerson, all in the early days of his career. The 2-time Alabama heavyweight champion, a 15-time Southeastern Tag Team Championship with Southeastern Championship Wrestling, 10 of those times with Randy Rose, 3 with Phil Hickerson. He even held the Windy City Pro Wrestling Tag Team Championship with Randy Rose for a while there. Bobby Eaton, of course, the former American Tag Team with him. Yeah. So basically, he was a 2-time Mid-South Tag Team Champion. He was a former Mid-Atlantic version of the World Tag Team Champions as well. So that's it on our little tribute to Loverboy Dennis Condrey of the Midnight Express fame, passing away at the age of 76 this past Friday. This past Friday. this past Friday at the age of 76. So now what I'm going to do, of course, I want to do a moment of silence for him. Basically considered a great star of the territories in the 70s and 80s. Obviously, was part of the Midnight Express. Had some legendary feuds with the likes of course, Rock and Roll Express and the Fantastics. So now we're going to do a moment of silence for Loverboy Dennis Condrey. All right, there we go. So one more little trivia tidbit for you as well, in terms of Dennis Condrey and the Midnight Express too. So it was Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton that gave us the rocket launcher tag team finisher. That was a team where Condrey would basically assist Bobby Eaton at a flying, basically a diving body splash. Excuse me a moment. I'm gonna go. I need to go off camera here for a quick moment. I'll be right back as soon as I, of course, get the right thing up. The music on. I'll be just back. All right, so with that, we went kind of a little bit longer than I intended, though. But anyways, so on that story. But anyways, we're gonna actually go through the wrestling wrap up real quickly here. Get caught up on the weekends. I won't really talk about TNA tonight. I'll save that for tomorrow. They do have their pay-per-view coming up, so those other two events I was telling you about that happen later this week, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But so Friday night, going back to Friday Night SmackDown, to kind of give you heads up on what happened on Friday Night SmackDown. Of course, WWE is continuing to build towards WWE is continuing to build towards WrestleMania coming up in about 4 weeks here. So coming from the Lenovo Center in Raleigh, North Carolina, with Wade Barrett and Joe Tessitore on commentary. Opening match of the evening saw Damian Priest and R-Truth defeat the MFTs of JC Mateo and Tama Tonga to become the new WWE Tag Team Champions. Of course, Priest and R-Truth got some help from the Wyatt Six as they were trying to reclaim the ladder. Then in the second straight tag match of the evening, the Motor City Machine Guns defeated Fraxium in 8 minutes 1 second, in which Motor City Machine Guns got some help from Candice LeRae and what looks to be a possible love triangle developing between, of course, LeRae, her husband Johnny Gargano, and Alex Shelley. Stay tuned for that. Aleister Black defeated Sami Zayn, who got some help from Trick Williams, who I believe it was Trick Williams who was sitting at ringside, continuing Zayn's frustrations. Carmelo Hayes successfully obtained the United States Championship over Ilya Dragunov. And the main event saw there was this little force saw for the women's tag team titles go to a no contest when Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair basically interfered in the match, in the match between the Irresistible Forces and the Bella Twins, and what many people are citing as a way for them to possibly book a triple threat match for the WWE Women's Tag Titles coming up at WrestleMania. So stay tuned for that. So that's all that happened on Friday. And now let's look ahead to Saturday. We'll go back to Saturday and Sunday. Look back at what was going on while WWE had Friday Night SmackDown on Saturday. And there were 2 episodes of Collision this weekend. First on Saturday, Slam Dunk Saturday, in which the opening of Slam Dunk Saturday saw Kyle Fletcher defeat his mentor, Robbie Eagles, to retain the TNT title. Then a 6-man tag match, the La Facción Ingobernables of Beast Mortos, Dralistico, and Rush defeated the team of Dom Kubrick, Lucas Riley, and Alpha Zoe. The Brawling Birds of Jamie Hayter and Alex Windsor defeated the Sisters of Sin of Scott Blue and Julia Hart. And the main event saw the Death Riders duo of Claudio Castagnoli and Daniel Garcia with Marina Shafir in their corner defeat the team of Commander and Mascara Dorado. And then on Sunday, on last night's Slam Dunk Sunday, which took place last night with Tony Schiavone and Nigel McGuinness, of course, on commentary, coming from the Save Mart Center in Fresno State, which both shows were coming from there, Fresno, California. The opening tag match saw Orange Cassidy and Roderick Strong defeat the Lethal Twist duo of Jay Lethal and Lee Johnson with Blake Christian in their corner. In a non-title match, AEW Women's World Tag Team Champions, Divine Dominion of Megan Bayne and Lena Cross defeated the team of Alex Gracie and Vipress. Tommaso Ciampa defeated Leo Rush in 11 minutes. And in the main event, saw in a match for the AEW World Trios titles, Jet Speed, a Speedball Mike Bailey, and the Jet Kevin Knight and Mystico successfully retained the World Trios title for the Don Callis family members of Josh Alexander, El Clone, and Konosuke Takeshita. All right, so now to look ahead to tonight's Raw as WWE is continuing to build towards WrestleMania. Here's what's going to be going down on Raw tonight on on Netflix with Michael Cole and Corey Graves on commentary, coming from the TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. In another non-title tag team match, the WWE World Tag Team Champions, the Uso brothers, Jey and Jimmy Uso, will be taking on the Vision duo of Logan Paul and Austin Theory. And some other news, of course. Congratulations to Jimmy Uso and Naomi as they welcomed their first child into this world. It's Jimmy Uso's third child. He had 2 from Radia's marriage. But congratulations to Jimmy Uso and Naomi on bringing their first child into this world. Also in a singles match tonight, Grayson Waller defeated will be taking on Javon Evans. In women's tag team action, the Kabuki Warriors of Asuka and Kairi Sane will be taking on the team of Bayley and Lyra Valkyria. And in a match for the WWE Intercontinental Champion, Dominic Mysterio will be getting his contractual rematch as he'll be taking on Penta. So there we go with that. So that's all we got for the wrestling wrap-up for you guys tonight. So now, about to close things out here. So what we're going to do now is, with today being, of course, Monday, March the 23rd, 2026, we're going to go ahead and take a look back at this date in each history. So 76, 2001, 2011, and 1996. Alrighty then. So first off, we're going to head back to March of 1976, 50 years ago today. On this date, 50 years ago today. Let me pull that up. On this date, 50 years ago today, back in 1976, the fifth issue of Marvel Presents went on sale on this date back in 1976. It sold for 25 cents, 32 pages. Story Planet of the Absurd, and written by Steve Gerber, with pencils by Alan Negron, Howard Victor Chaikin doing the inking, lettering done by Karen Mantillo, and Janice Cohen doing the coloring. So the fifth issue of Marvel Presents went on sale on this date 50 years ago today. Also on this date in 1996, we move ahead to 30 years ago. On this date, 30 years ago today, premiering over in Japanese theaters on this date 30 years ago today, Mushi Productions Pippi to Benai Hotaro, or Pippi's Unforgettable Friends, premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 1996. So 30 years ago today, Mishi Productions Pippi's Unforgettable Friends premiered on this date back in 1996. There we go with that. Then we move ahead to the year 2001. On this date, the year 2001, of course, 3 days before the final Monday Night Raw event, or Monday night or WCW Monday Nitro event. On this date in 2001, 25 years ago today, World Championship Wrestling's assets, trademarks, and selected wrestler contracts were bought out by Vince McMahon, marking the end of the Monday Night Wars. AOL Time Warner retained the former WCW, which reverted to its previous name of Universal Wrestling Corporation, and still exists as of 2014 as a legal entity under Time Warner ownership, operating solely for the purpose of dealing with old contracts and lawsuits. So on this date, basically WCW sold out to WWE. On this date 25 years ago today. And finally, Finally, On this date, 15 years ago today, in 2011, on this date in 2011, 15 years ago today, let's see. Symbionic Titan is canceled after 20 episodes due to low merchandise sales, and series creator Gendy Tartakovsky leaving Cartoon Network to work with Sony Pictures Animation. So on this date, 15 years ago today, Symbionic Titan was canceled after 20 episodes. All right, so with that being said, I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We kind of took a look back at a bit of a profile piece, this time of a pro wrestler. Again, condolences go out to friends, families, and fans of Loverboy Dennis Condrey, a legend in tag team wrestling and a legend in the territorial days of the NWA and AWA. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight, and I hope to see everybody back here. Oh, don't forget, also this Sunday I'll be joined by Terry from Mighty Geek Studios, as we'll be taking another trip down Comics History Lane, taking a trip back to August 1940. So with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.